Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Mars Volta fans, like Tom and I, were pretty decimated by hearing the news that the Mars Volta broke up last year in 2012 after releasing an album that we really liked, Nocturnica.
Yeah.
Lead guy Omar Rodriguez-Lopez being kind of the main brain behind the Mars Volta and even at the drive-in way back in the day. Writes crazy guitar parts, has this very theatrical vision for his music. So it was interesting. We knew, everyone who's followed the Mars Volta for a number of years now knew that Omar was going to do something new. So when we heard about Bosnian Rainbows, I knew it was a band that I wanted to kind of follow and make sure that Tom and I kept on our radar so we could review their album when it dropped. So Bosnian Rainbows, self-titled debut, it came out and we are reviewing it today for you guys. To give you kind of an overview, it's comprised of two members of the Mars Volta, Omar, and then the drummer, Dean Tony Parks. I don't really know a lot about him. But he's also teaming up with Terry Genderbender on vocals. She's from La Bergerettes, which is a band I'm honestly not familiar with. But to tell you the truth, I was really interested to see how Omar was going to deal with a female vocalist and like what that brought to the table. Now, albeit Cedric, his vocals are pretty high pitched. But this is a very interesting sound change for Omar. He's never done anything like this. You still have a lot. First of all, the first thing that we have to address, I think, when the sound is just noting the fact that there was absolutely no computers used in recording Bosnian Rainbows.
Very cool. All analog approach.
Absolutely.
Which, they used to make good albums that way.
There were good albums.
There were good albums that came out before the computer was invented. Right. Let's just remember that.
There's definitely electronic elements, like they're using keyboards on a number of tracks here, so a lot of times I may say synths and I don't really mean computer-based, like press a button.
Because there are analog synths.
Absolutely, and so there's definitely still elements, so if you didn't know that piece of information, you honestly probably couldn't tell, but it's still worth noting because it's an interesting approach to how they recorded this.
Yeah.
If I was to describe this sound, it's alternative rock, but it's different than anything you've ever heard. They're mixing genres here in original ways that I find to be kind of refreshing, because you get an 80s kind of new wave like Flock of Seagulls guitar coming from Omar at times, and then Terry Genderbender's vocals, she's all over the place. There's times where she sounds like St. Vincent, and there's times where she's getting more experimental with her vocals. She's ranging all over the place. She sounds very aggressive at times, and you have a lot of more guitar-based tracks that get a little bit more experimental, and then there's also, especially on the back half of this record, some tracks that are a little bit more simple, where it's just a verse-chorus arrangement, not too expansive. Now, to tell you the truth, you guys have commented on a number of our reviews saying that Tom and I agree way too much. And what's funny about that is we never feel like we really do.
Yeah.
Even when we're like a few points apart, like we both came to that agreement from different directions. So we don't feel like we're really in agreement all the time.
It's never deliberate. It's always just coincidental when stuff like
However, there are those key times where we're just way off from each other. And this is one of those times.
Yeah!
Tom, you don't like this album.
No, I did not like it at all.
So what did you like about it?
The big thing for me, just to cut right to the chase, is the vocals.
Right.
I think that it is a cool approach to the vocals. She has a very unique vocal style, but I just didn't really like anything about it. For me, as the listener, it just did nothing for me. And in fact, it distracted from a lot of the positive qualities of the music. So let's break down the vocals. When it comes to the lyrics, I thought a lot of the lyrics were kind of awkward and actually created a barrier for me where I couldn't really get right into them. And it's not because they were so cryptic that I didn't know what they mean. I actually like stuff like that. Yeah. It's more just there were some phrases in there and just some of the lyrical themes that I had absolutely no way to connect with, which I have to put partially on myself too as the listener, and I don't really know what other people's experiences with that are. Obviously, it didn't stop you from liking it a lot more than it stopped me, but at the same time, I would love to hear what other people are thinking of that. But it's not only the lyrics, it's also the melodies themselves. I felt a lot of times they were kind of bland, kind of repetitive. Every now and then she would jump to like a higher octave or something, and those were the moments I liked, such as track 5, I Cry For You, when she really belted belts it in the chorus. Like, I could really get behind that. I thought that was great. That and track 2, Worthless, were really the only 2 songs on this album that I really loved.
Worthless is fantastic.
Oh,
it has
great.
to be one of the best tracks of the year.
Great song. I totally agree. But besides those 2 and the opener track, Eli, which I liked okay, I didn't like a single other track on this album. And it wasn't just like, they were okay. Like, they actively bothered me. And the vocals were a big part of it. Torn Maps is one of those that, for me, like the vocal melody, especially in the chorus, I just kind of felt like it was da 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 da.
And that's the single.
Which makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
But I felt like I just had to trudge through moments like that. The performance didn't really get me much either. I just don't think that she was very convincing. I didn't really feel it. She didn't really sell it for me. So aside from that, I kind of have to default back to the instrumentals, and there was definitely some positive things in the instrumentals, especially in the guitar work, which I would expect. There are some great guitar lines throughout, but it just wasn't quite enough to pull it out of the negative for me, especially considering I felt like a lot of the instrumentals were there just to bolster up the vocals, so then I'm back to listening to the vocals, which I just didn't really enjoy.
Do you think that was a production issue at all?
I don't think as much. I think
a lot of albums are produced so that the vocals are more front and center, and this one I didn't really feel that.
No, I don't think it was that way. I think it's just the way the songs were written. I think that they were written to have that focus be on the vocals when the vocals were in there. And there was, while there were some cool instrumental interludes and moments like that where the guitar, bass, and drums shined, and those little like synthesizers and things that were kind of floating around, it still wasn't enough. It's like once it got back to the vocals, it was the vocalist show, and I just didn't like that.
Yeah, I definitely felt that there were certain tracks that really, personified exactly what you're talking about. Now, in my mind, so like just 2 things. 1, I love rhythm, and 2, I love Omar. The way he approaches songwriting, I think he's just a genius, and I love most of his guitar parts. They have, they just resonate with me. They're complicated. They're fun to pick apart, and they really add a lot to the songs. So where Omar was playing some really unique guitar parts, even produced or in a unique way, I felt like it really added value to the songs. Now, rhythmically, I liked how the vocals and Omar's guitar would work off one another. You'd have like a vocal line, and then Omar would play some diddly on guitar, right? It oscillated back and forth, and that pushed the song along for me. Kind of, it moved the song and kept it fluid. And I definitely like that in tracks like Eli and Worthless. The I Fell in Love didn't do that quite as much. Had more of a ballad tone to it. But I thought that song they do a really good job of embracing the emotion behind it. And that's one thing that I think Terry Genderbender did a very good job on this album, is emoting. And it was something that I was able to relate with it. And I think that's kind of comes down. I do think this album is going to be somewhat polarizing. Yeah. Now,
it's all about that personal connection, whether you can get that.
Now, I definitely got to say, I'm not surprised that your 3 track picks agree with 3 of my 4 tracks. And all of those are in tracks 1 through 5 on this album. This album takes a serious step down at about the halfway point. Track 6, neither Tom and I liked it. Torn Maps, I think is okay. Definitely has, there's a lot of Rush influence throughout this album. There's always been Rush influence throughout the Mars Volta, and you could even hear a little bit of that in At the Drive-In. I just feel like the Rush influence is huge on this record. And I think that they do some cool things with song structures. To me, it's the back half of the album is where you get the more simple song structures. You don't get a lot of the experimentation, and quite honestly, the songs just sound less flushed out. They don't sound quite as finished.
They don't sound as confident.
No, not at all. Not at all. And it's like this album is kind of a work in progress. I really like a lot of the things that I'm hearing. It's not perfect, but it's so original, and originality and like of all the factors that we analyze, to me, originality is the most important. There is so much music out there that finding something original and fresh in 2013 is kind of it's a tall order, honestly, and a lot of bands just simply fail at this. Our next review, Smith Westerns, is actually going to be one of those bands where it's like, come on, just do something original, right? That's how I feel most of the time, and quite honestly, this album does a great job of presenting old ideas, reinventing them, and making an original take on that.
See, for me it was a little tough because going back to that back half, like I felt like every time I listened to this album, it was 5 minutes longer than the last time I listened to it. I'd get halfway through and be like, oh God, is it done yet? And then I'd look at the track listing and think, oh God, I'm only halfway through. It's like driving through Nebraska. For any of you Midwesterners out here, that'll make sense to you. Dizzy's coming to help
Would you take Disney to Nebraska?
No.
You wouldn't?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's freaky. But
no, I know what you mean. Like,
it just dragged for me, and oh man.
It would really suck to have to drive through Nebraska with your torn map.
Oh no. Okay, can we be done?
Yeah, we can. But
Okay.
I just want you to know that I agree with you. I just think that, this band showed a lot of signs of promise, and I think that if you don't have a negative reaction to the vocals are how you connect to the emotion, and I agree with your assessment. It's just that I was able to connect and was impressed with Terry Genderbender's, emotive performance a little bit more than you were.
Yeah.
I think that's the basis of our disagreement.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Personally, I think this album's worth a 76.
I'm going 54.
Wow! It's a big disagreement
It is.
for Tom and I, and doesn't always happen that way. So I expect that this is going to be kind of a polarizing listen for most people, and you guys are going to really like this album, maybe even more than I did, or you're going to really hate it like Tom did. And if you're somewhere in between, then our score is kind of representative at that point. So let us know what you thought about Bosnian Rainbow's debut album, Bosnian Rainbows, at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. Also, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, let us know what albums from 2013 you guys have been listening to and want us to review that you haven't seen us review yet. Your feedback is quintessential to what we do here. Thank you for watching. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Moving Music Critique Forward.
It makes my bones grow low.